Welcome to Between the Vines. I'm Kevin Martin. I'm here with Jennifer Phillips Russo. We are the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program from Penn State University and Cornell University. Just wanted to bring you another weekly update as we sort of head towards the beginning of the end of our growing season, at least pre-harvest growing season. And I think we've got sort of the things that come with the end now. So we've gone through that phase of where concords are actively managed, and we are now doing a little bit of more passive management before harvest. And the things that entails for Jennifer and for growers are, I think, sort of where we're at on the 12th of August. Jen, do you want to mention some events we've got, since we have this window of maybe things at least growers told us, things might be a little bit less crazy for them?
Absolutely. So we have rescheduled our Cornell Lake Erie Research and Extension Laboratory Demonstration Day. We originally had it scheduled for August 2nd, where researchers were coming in and we're going to talk all about what's going on. And that just didn't seem like the right time. I mean, we had some people register and we thank you for that, but we wanted it to be a bigger event than those that registered. And we were told from some growers that it was they just wanted to relax a little bit at that first week of August, which I don't blame you. So we rescheduled it for August 31st. I heard back yesterday from the New York State DEC that they did grant us one credit for that. It's going to start at 9 o'clock in the morning at the facilities at Cornell Agritech at the lab there in Portland, New York. And it's going to go through 1 o'clock. We're going to walk around and look at all of the blocks and all of the research that we have there and how that applies to our industry moving forward. So I really welcome you to come see it. Look at all of our equipment that's going to be out there, listen to myself and Dr. Terry Bates talk about the research, and then we'll have a lunch from 12 to 1. Do you have anything you want to add to that? I suppose I should just talk a little bit about what they're going to see. So we have our phenology block that is pruned differentially. So we try to capture all the different pruning styles, bud number, I should say, that people leave up. And then we monitor that every year throughout the growing season and have our historical data for our what we put on our website, and sort of gives us guidelines and lets us see trends in this area for the way that concords grow. There are many other things, such as the floor management study, and there is disease monitoring and nutrient monitoring and robotic pruning. Come out and join us that day. There's a lot to learn and a lot to look forward to of what's coming in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it should be a great event. It would have been a really interesting event to do early August. If you guys follow our program and you're here locally, over the past that we've really liked doing summer conferences, but it is always very difficult. It is really nice to be able to, actually see vineyards and equipment and, have a trade show where equipment can be there, which is what we won't be able to have in the end of August. But it's really nice to have all that stuff, and we unfortunately can't do that in the winter when it is a really easy time to meet and share educational information and research. So we try to balance those two things, and hopefully you do get a chance to join us on the 31st. You may have heard some background noise. Unfortunately, I ran into some issues doing some tiling. August is actually my busy time of the year. It tends to be a very good time to install drain tile, and my daughter and I were up till 10 last night. So the other daughter's waking up and wondering where I'm at. And
I love hearing that sound, so it doesn't bother me.
And the sound's not so great, but I can't be in the studio, which of course is a closet next to the bedroom. So
The joys from working from home at certain points.
Mm-hmm. So the only other things I have, I just want to remind people the NEWA model that we reference for Grape Berry Moth has gone through a number of iterations and now is on a new website. Just want to call your attention to Jen's article last week in the crop update in terms of how to use that model. But just observing what it says right now, which is It says that unless it's a very warm year, the last generation of berry moth that we just sprayed early this week or late last week, maybe early last week at a couple sites, but you get the point. Would now be entering diapause, with the exception of extremely warm years. But I just wanted to note that this, in more than half of our sites, was technically what is being described as an extremely warm year. So I believe the model will start to reflect that once we get more growing degree days. It will notice that we're getting more growing degree days and that the extra generation is a distinct possibility, or will happen, I guess is a better way of putting it, in some of the warmer sites. If I recall correctly, and I think the model, the reason I'm calling this to your attention is the model could be a little bit confusing right now, because it says no further action is required unless it was an extremely warm year. So what you'll see is if you reach that 1610 before or August 5th, before or at August 5th, you have that potential for an extra generation. And so the way we handle an extra generation is we put on more sprays 2 weeks after the last spray. So that pushes us out until somewhere around late next week, probably, is when you could consider an extra application of insecticide for Grape Berry Moth. And it wouldn't hurt to even go later than that. I don't think we typically, we typically don't have good coverage throughout that last generation, because it would take multiple sprays, and there may be a few blocks that do need that, especially in Pennsylvania. But what I think we do more commonly see is one more insecticide where there is sort of a regular level of high pressure, if that makes sense. And then we may see multiple insecticides where there is pressure that is, I guess I would characterize as somewhat uncontrollable.
Sorry, there was some background noise here as well, so I couldn't jump in.
Mornings are loud.
Thank you for bringing that up. It has been a hot year. I'm glad that you addressed that. The fact that it's been a hot year has sort of pushed some of our varieties. They've been in Veraison for a while, but we have more that continue to happen throughout these couple of weeks in August. If you are just a Concord grower in this area, and I don't mean that with any disrespect, because it is what drives this area, Concords should be expected to go into Veraison. We have that tool that I told you about, that phenology block that we track year after year after year, and it has shown that Concord Veraison usually starts 69 to 70 days after bloom. We are approaching that next week. Because it's been more warm than not, I expect it to be lean more towards the 69, which put that at August 16th this year. So that is next, I think, Wednesday. I'm sorry, I don't have a calendar right now.
Yeah, that's Tuesday. I was going to mention that. I'm really interested to see what this year really was, because so it's the 16th plus or minus, or the 17th plus or minus 2 or 3 days. And like you said, what controls that plus or minus? And my thought was in mid-July will certainly be 2 days early, because it's very dry. And then we got a whole bunch of rain. So I don't know if that counts as being dry or being wet. I'm sort of leaning towards it counting as dry, because it happened in that critical period where cell division was happening. But it was an unusual year so it was an unusual year in the sense that it was really, really quite dry. And then we've had adequate rainfall for 3 weeks now, almost. It was 3 weeks. So 21 days is a good chunk of the 60. So I guess we'll see where it turns out, but it'll certainly be next week. There's no way it's not going to be next week. It's just a question of which day next week.
So I did have an industry field representative send me a picture yesterday of I have not found any Concords turning purple. I have found Concord clusters with black rot that might look like it was turning a little bit purple, but I have not found the softening really yet in purple of the coloration of the clusters. Yeah, one sent me a photo yesterday, right after I submitted my crop update, and showed a little bit of turning of purple on some Concord clusters. Granted, it was after I wrote it, and it was just 1 or 2 berries on 1 or 2 clusters in 28,000 acres, 25,000 acres. That's not to mention the other varieties aren't in it, because we are tracking those as well at Clairol. And if I have my information right here to let you know which ones are definitely Marquettes, we don't have at Clairol, but those are really early ripening and have been turning for quite some time, a couple of weeks now. So at Clairol itself, we are monitoring Vignol, Niagara, Saval, West. Oh, sorry, I say West Riesling. That's because it's on the west side. Riesling, Vincent, Concords, Ives, and Delaware. And out of those particular varieties, we have I consider anything really over 8 bricks is actually that turning point of Veraison. And in saying so, Savals are there, Vincents are there, Ives are there, Delaware is close. And that's just at Clairol. So obviously yours are going to be a little bit different if you are monitoring it, but
I mean, and the other thing that Veraison sort of brings is harvest, especially for wine grape growers. Very shortly after Concord Veraison is typically when harvest just starts, and then I think Auroras start 10 or 12 days later, depending on the schedules of holidays and things like that. But so that essentially means we will be harvesting in August, which is not unusual anymore, but it will be interesting to see when in August. And typically things move very quickly when things are early, because the 12 days of ripening you need after Concord Veraison for your wine grape varieties occur in the middle part of August instead of later. And the same thing I think will happen with Concord. We usually start to see most Concord getting harvested a month after Veraison, but that can be pushed up a few days, or even if it's not pushed up a few days, you can see bricks being uniformly high enough so that you're not waiting to harvest when processors open, because it's doing those 32 days of ripening in August rather than September. So that brings you to, the very middle part of September with Concord harvest and some Niagaras preceding that. So you're looking at doing Niagara harvest in the very early part of September, maybe the second week. So I would assume it'll be an interesting, fast-paced year. I do know in our region, some of the crop estimates we've seen all over the place are all over the place in terms of crop load, although we don't have that data. But there was some frost damage last year, as crazy as last year was, and as huge as some of the crops were, or many of the crops. We have some very large crops in Northeast Pennsylvania this year.
There's been some thinning, yeah.
There's been some thinning. There's probably been, maybe there was some stuff that needed to be thinned. One of the things I do always say when it comes to, understanding your risk of loss when you make thinning decisions is having a very good understanding of not just what your crop load was. And, this kind of makes if you have a nervous eye twitch and you're a viticulturalist, it'll start going. But this is just my perspective as a business manager. You need to know what your neighbor's crop load is, because the flexibility of the processor is based on what the average ripening looks like. And I don't know what that answer is going to be, because there's a lot of acreage in Northeast Pennsylvania. So, this probably could be a tricky year for processors to try to make that balance of making sure that they open when some of the 4-ton crops start to mature, but also they're not open for 8 weeks, and they are open long enough to make sure some of those 10-ton crops can get in. And obviously they're going to do that, but it does create some challenges in terms of if for an individual grower, planning and trying to stage equipment and labor, trying to figure out exactly when that maturity is going to happen, because it's weather dependent, and there's a lot of moving parts when crops are variable.
Right. You should, you should be. I'm not sure how many people do. but testing your sugars before going into harvest to make sure you're meeting those standards. And if you are looking for how to do that, if that's something that you might want a little to brush up on, we do have information out on our website, or just give us a call and we can walk you through that process. But most of you, I'm pretty sure, who are listening to this in our region have done that for years.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the big news this week will be, getting out in your vineyards, doing some scouting, seeing what turns purple when. I think if you do that, you're going to have a good idea of where you need to start doing your brick sampling later in the year. Might cut down on how much brick sampling you have to do. If you won't have some of those surprises in September, you can be surprised next week instead, one way or the other. So that will help a little bit inform your decision. But in addition to that, I think, take a look at the Grape Berry Moth model if you are considering an additional insecticide application, and try to see when, you did reach 1620, to see if there is another generation on your farm, because not all NEWA stations are the same. And we reached 1620 right around that August 5th, which means some were before, some were after, and you certainly don't want to put on additional insecticides for a generation that does not exist. So that will occur the week following. Would probably be the first time, like the 21st would be the first time you would put on an insecticide for berry moth, and it could go later than that if you so choose. So those are kind of the big things, I think, for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. And as you're out there walking around and looking for Veraison, please send pictures, text them to me. You guys all have my cell phone number. You can get it off of the website, or you have it just because you call me often. Please send me photos, and I might include them in the crop update. But it's always great to see what's going on when I can't get out there.
All right. I think that's all we have for this week's update. I want to thank you all for joining us. Please feel free to reach out, contact us. You can do that now. You can do that during harvest. I know that harvest is a busy time, but a lot of that busyness is, driving around in circles and getting a lot of stuff done. So I know some of you spend a lot of time on the phone and listening to podcasts. So if we can use that time to provide some education and answer some questions you have, we'd be more than happy to do that. And good luck with the rest of the pre-Veraison growing season. We'll see you next week.
Have a great week, everyone.